Welcome to Gold Derby's Q&A panel on the making of Weird, the Al Yankovic Story. I am senior editor Marcus James Dixon, and please join me in welcoming some of the artists who are responsible for making this Roku original film. We have editor Jamie Kennedy, production designer Dan Butts, two composers, Zach Robinson and Leo Birenberg, and two people from the sound department. We have Anthony Vanchure and Mike James Gallagher. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
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 What up?
I kind of want to start with a group question for everybody. I grew up as a huge Weird Al fan. My brothers and I had his cassette tapes, and we would always listen to them. I don't think I knew at the time that it was parody songs. I think I just thought they were his own songs. So I guess, what was it like working with such a music superstar, legendary songwriter, entertainer? He co-produced the movie, and he served as the co-writer with Eric Appel. Jamie, let's start with you.
Honestly, huge dream come true. I've said before to people that, like, if no one else had ever seen this movie, it still would probably be the highlight of my life. Like, if we had just made it in a vacuum and it was just for us, like, I can't top the experience of working on this movie. I've been a huge Weird Al fan my whole life. My husband is a huge Weird Al fan. We went to like every concert he had out here prior to working on this movie. My first of his album was Running with Scissors. And I listened to that a bunch when I was a wee lass. So coming onto the project, the whole reason I kind of wound up on it is I worked with the director Eric Appel on a Quibi show a couple of years ago called Die Hard. And while we were working on it, it came about that I learned that he was the one who had made the original fake Funny or Die trailer starring Aaron Paul. And when that came out, I was like, Eric, you have no idea. This is like one of my favorite YouTube videos ever made. and he was like, oh, well, we've been trying to make it a real feature for some time. And I was like, Eric, if you ever actually make this feature, please call me to edit it. And he's a man of his word, and he did.
And Dan, what about you?
Same. It was a dream come true. It's strange because I've actually worked with Al for many years, starting it when he was as a director. So I've worked on a bunch of his videos and projects, and then it was years later, and I hadn't talked to him in quite a while, and he just texted me and said, "You want to make a movie?" I wish every project actually just started like that. But and then it was magical.
And Zach?
Running with Scissors, also my album. My first concert ever. I was 9 years old, running with Scissors at tour at the Greek Theater with my dad. That was my first concert ever. I think I told Al, and he was like, "Oh, that's cool." And I was like, "Probably gets that a lot." I thought it was really cool. Yeah, and I mean, obviously, I think like when Leo and I got brought on, we had worked with Eric on past projects as well, and when we got brought on, I think we were just like, well, how is our music even gonna stand next to all the Al music? And I think, before we even kind of knew what the concept was, that was what our biggest challenge was gonna be. But working with Al and Eric and just like working really intimately, like on music with Al, like, whoa, that's a really cool thing.
Leo?
Yeah, jumping off of what Zach said, like, I obviously dream come true. Kid of the 90s, a lot of Weird Al in my life. Al's like the nicest guy on the planet, like an actual human embodiment of like a saint. Like, doesn't eat animals, doesn't curse, doesn't look at his phone. Like, he's so freaking nice. And I think what was like that like made it even more surreal. And like Zach and I would go by the cutting room for like the occasional meeting, and Al would like be on Zoom, except he was touring at the same time. So then he would just like hop off of Zoom and be like, "See you guys, I gotta go play a concert," and then like go play a show and then pop back on after the show. And like that to me, that was just crazy. And like, so like, he's so nice and like personal in all his interactions. And I think they say don't meet your heroes, but in Weird Al's case, definitely meet your heroes, because he is amazing.
Anthony, what about you?
Same old story. Loved Weird Al growing up. I actually had a compilation album called The Food Album was the first one I got. So it was like all of his food songs, and I loved it to death. And then loved Bad Hair Day. I think the Amish Paradise music video, when that came out, I remember just like rolling on the floor laughing when it came out. I got brought on the project. I work for a company called the Formosa Group, and I was on a sales call, and they're like, "Oh, we have this potential to work on this Weird Al movie," and I was like, stop! Yes, just say yes. I don't care if they have $0. Like, I want to do this. And I sent one of my friends at work a picture of me as Weird Al. I'd went as Weird Al for Halloween years and years and years ago. Just sending it to him, going like, "This is how serious I am. I want to do this project." He didn't tell me that he sent it to the production team. So yeah. So Jamie and Eric, when I was lucky, I got to interview with them. They're like, "Oh yeah, we saw the picture of you dressed as Weird Al for Halloween," and it was it was great. So it was a dream. It was a dream to work on this movie.
And Mike, with the cool futuristic background, what about you?
I Weird Al had a huge presence in my childhood. I have a distinct memory of like sitting around with my family. I think we had the VHS recorder ready to go, and Weird Al was about to premiere I'm Fat. So we were super excited about that, and I had that on repeat all the time, which is funny because I became a sound designer, and that video has bonkers sound effects, if you remember that. And and it's funny because like we saw the trailer before we got hired, and we were already excited about seeing the film. So when Anthony got that call from Formosa, we were both like super thrilled. And me and Anthony have been friends for a long time. And one of the first times I ever hung out with him was when he was actually dressed as Weird Al on Halloween.
Yeah.
So so it's full circle for us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, right now in Hollywood, we're in the middle of a writer's strike, and I can't think of a better way to honor our writers than to talk about how great the script is, written by Eric and Al. I'm curious, anyone can jump in. When you were reading the script for the first time, what are some moments or some scenes that really stood out to you and made you realize this is something special?
My favorite, the one we quote in our household all the time, and it's something that we tried to we captured it on screen, but on the page it was hilarious, which is when he's writing My Bologna, and in the script it says POV Al to Bologna, and then it says POV Bologna to Al, and it like kept going back, and just those written on the page, I'm like, they get it, they get what this movie is supposed to be.
I remember the script was sent to me, and I was reading it. I was on a family trip when I got the script, and I'm reading it cackling to myself, like on the other side of the room. And my family was like, "What is he laughing at?" And it was just like every page I was cracking up, and I was like, "This is truly one of the funniest scripts I've ever read." And it was, every scene. Sorry, guys.
Sorry.
No.
We were, when Leo and I were reading it, we just were texting the whole time because it's like every page there's a new set piece that we knew was going to have some crazy different score style, and we were saying like, "Oh, so there's like a John Wick action scene."
Yeah.
No matter
John Wick in a Hawaiian shirt is
that's true. You're right. It does say that. And even the animated scene too. Like we're like, "Oh, this is that requires a different type of like musical language too." So there were the LSD sequence. Like there were a lot of things that we were reading where we were like, this is going to be a massive score. And I think we had to not convince, we had to show people that it was going to be, we knew from the script it was going to be a massive score.
Yeah.
And I think everyone else, we just were like, this is what it's going to be. Like, this isn't like a Funny or Die skit. Like this is a Hollywood movie with a Hollywood film score.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny. I felt the same way when I was reading the script, basically looking at like all the amount of set pieces. And I was like, well, obviously we're not going to do that. We have $8 in like 20 minutes. So, and then we ended up doing all of it and more. So it was amazing.
Yeah, I think we felt the same way about sound effects. That we're like, okay, a giant fight sequence. All right. Okay. LSD sequence. Oh, gunshots. All right. Okay. Pablo Escobar jungle. Yeah, we can do this. Yeah.
I think my favorite line is when he's on the phone with his mom, the great Julia Nicholson, and she says something like, "Oh, and your father wants me to say he's not proud of you." That's a great line.
A lot of people always ask whether like there was, because we have so many like talented comedic actors in the movie, with whether there was a lot of improv and whether we had to like go through a lot of improv takes. And the answer is no. Like there was like no time for improv when they were shooting it, but also the script is just so good and so funny. It didn't need like punch ups in any way. Like it was a solid script.
Very true.
And Dan, I want to talk a little about Weird Al's childhood home. What sort of vibe were you going for? And was it based on his real home? Did he give you some tips on what his real home looked like? I'm very curious.
It's strange because Eric and Al and I had talked early on about trying to make his childhood home like not like the real home, in that Linwood was a pretty nice suburb of California. They wanted it to feel like a gritty steel town in like Ohio. So we kind of started there, but I did bring a lot of like his childhood stuff into it, especially in his bedroom, which unbelievably he had very few photos of. He has like a photo of some of his like awards he won and a typewriter he used to use. And so we matched those exactly. And then just knowing Al from over the years, I knew some stuff he was kind of into. The fun thing for me was kids used to order stuff from the back of comic books. They'd have like little things you could buy, and randomly I was able to source a bunch of those things and put them on shelves. And I knew books he was into when he was a kid and things like that. So I populated his room with stuff like that, which was amazing because when he came in the room, I had asked him for photos. And he was like, I just don't have any of the bedroom. So he came in and he was really silent. And I was like, oh, I've blown it. I messed this up. I didn't do it. And he was just silent, looked around, and he smiled, and he goes, you have no idea how close this is to my room, which was so awesome. But as far as the rest of the house, it was the same style that his house was decorated in, but it was a little bit more kind of down for the story. It wasn't, his mom kept his house really nice. So we kind of like dirtied it up and made it a little bit more gritty for just to serve the story.
The swimming pool scene is probably the best and most famous scene with all of those cameos. Jamie, do you recall, was there any scenes or moments that you had to cut out that you really wish could have made it into that swimming pool scene?
In terms of swimming pool scene, we had a little bit more with Divine. There was a moment with emulating the famous Pink Flamingos moment. But it was one of those scenes where we had to kind of keep the action moving as much as possible. It is an homage to Boogie Nights, which was all, if you'll remember, kind of one take through the party, continuous motion. But the hard thing about this scene was we were stopping and starting, and like we weren't doing the continuous take through things. So we had to make some tough decisions in the editing room of like, how do we get to Jack Black as quick as possible while still honoring like all of these amazing cameos that we got. But also everyone has their own moment when they're singing Another One Rides the Bus. So we were able to kind of sacrifice some fun bits in order to get to that part of the scene much quicker.
And Zach and Leo, I'm curious, what was the biggest challenge of composing it's basically a modern day musical set in the past. All the songs are very well known to viewers. Did you use any of Weird Al's songs as inspiration for the score?
No, the score is like totally parallel to all the music in the movie, like the Al music that's on screen or part of the plot. And that actually was really helpful as just kind of like a starting boundary, because it allowed us, basically the concept of the score is to score it like a great American hero movie that you might see in the early 1990s, your Forrest Gump, your Shawshank Redemption, your Rudy. Rudy. Take your pick. And that is basically the core of the score, kind of all the aforementioned set pieces aside, which come in their own interesting musical ways. But we wanted to capture that kind of central Americana sound and keep going back to that.
How much
great. It's one of the best scores I've ever had the pleasure of working with. I know I've told you guys that, but yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, can you guys also, I know this is jumping ahead, but can you guys talk about the accordion cameo in the John Wick scene? Because that is, I think, one of my favorite.
But that's the best one.
That's the best one. So we had this amazing accordion player named Corey Pesaturo, who's actually like the world champion of accordion. Believe it or not, he's a Weird Al fan. And and we met him at a function and just went up to him and like, you're the perfect person for a project that we can't tell you about, but we'll hit you up in like 2 months. And he came over to our studio when we were writing. And I think the most fun, like one of the most fun kind of things that we got to do was, as Leo mentioned, like a lot of these kind of like 90s scores have certain characteristics that feature certain instruments that you're used to hearing when you see a movie and listen to a film score. So like maybe there's a flute solo or an oboe solo, but in our movie, we replaced that with an accordion. And there were so many fun little genre moments that we could play with. And I think what Jamie's referencing is like in this John Wick action scene that is like a score, like a very modern kind of, it's a one-off really. It's a very modern score, big drums, electronic synths. And then you just hear accordion just getting smashed through the entire cue. Literally, I had to tell Corey, because he's like a jazz accordion player, and he just like, I was like, don't play notes, just smash it. Just smash it. And it's amazing. It's just like also like, credit to Eric and Al too, and just like for letting us kind of go crazy with that, because that could have gone like the wrong way. And it was an ambitious move, but we had so much fun. Even in the Bologna scene, instead of like, you hear like the orchestra like fluttering with inspiration, but then you also hear the accordion just kind of like playing in the background as well, fluttering with flutes and woodwinds and stuff. And like that was like so much fun for us.
And I love the scene where the roommates tell Al, let's go to the bathroom and record because the acoustics are so great. For our sound guys, Anthony and Mike, what can you tell us about that scene?
Well, that's funny. It's funny enough is that Al did do that. That's like one of the bits of the movie that is actually true, is that he recorded that song in the bathroom. I think there's a plaque on his college, at the college where the bathroom is. Yeah, that scene was fun. I think the note, we wanted, with our mixer, Tony Solis, we put a lot of reverb on that moment. And there's so many moving parts to the sound throughout this entire movie. You have all your sound effects, you have all the music, you have Weird Al's music on top of that, and you're just trying to make everything shine and stick out as best as possible. And that moment was like, hey, for this bathroom scene, let's add a bunch of reverb in it for the moment where they're in the like bathroom recording it. So you can hear tons of reverb and stuff over the music. And then the second the like montage hits, we actually lose all that reverb, and then you just get that forward facing music just like hitting you like a big montage. And then it's a ton of fun.
And Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think the trick for me on that one was, so we didn't have to like completely drown it in so much bathroom reverb, which I love. But right when they say the bathroom has great acoustics, let's go record there, they slam open the door and you just hear this loud echo of these like ridiculous acoustics, which I think really sets the scene. And then we could, like Anthony was saying, Tony played with the reverb with that, and that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And Jamie, there were a lot of scenes that were up on the stage where Daniel Radcliffe is performing. Are those trickier to cut? They have so much, energy to them compared to just, some of the other scenes.
They are, but they're also, I love cutting like choreographed musical scenes. Not to get too in the weeds, but whenever I tackle a scene like that, I make kind of a super group, which is because they're all performing to the same song and it's all timed to the same thing. You can set an in point on every single basically camera or setup of when the song starts. And even though, it's not all going to be in sync with each other, like motion wise, because people are doing things different takes, you can sync it all together as one giant performance and watch like every take at every point in time. So I love putting those together and then like watching every camera down, and like when I find something that speaks to me, moving that up in my sequence. And by the time like I've watched it like 11 times, suddenly I have like almost the entire thing cut to the energy that like I'm seeing it as I saw it in my head. it's just so much fun to see it all come together in that way.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun. Those big audience crowd scenes are a lot of fun for Mike and I too. We mentioned this earlier that Weird Al was on tour during the whole making of this movie, and so there's these moments where Al is remoted in while we're mixing the movie and giving notes, but then he'd be like, "Oh, I got to go do vocal warm-ups for a minute." But there was these moments where he'd be like, "Oh, those crowd sounds aren't as big as they sound to me when I'm on stage." And I remember we were struggling to find one specific, just the right crowd sound, and I remember just going like, "Oh, hey Al, can you record your audience tonight? Can you just record your audience tonight and have them do it?" And he was like, "Yeah, sure." And so the next morning, we had this amazing audience recordings that we mixed in with all of our sound effects and our loop group and everything, and just these huge epic crowd sounds that we have.
Yeah, it's the moment where Daniel Radcliffe is like yelling at he's asking the crowd, like, "Do you want to work in a factory for the rest of your life?" And they're all yelling, "No." So we had to get it. He got the crowd yelling no. And he even said, he was like, "I'm going to get like 7 different levels of enthusiasm of them yelling no." And so we got this amazing recording back from him the next morning. And it made the local, and he was in, where was he? Wisconsin or?
Nebraska? I think it was Nebraska.
Nebraska, yeah, and it made the local news that next day, which was great.
I love that.
I also want to give credit to Eric on 2 particular things on the big when we shot Rocky Road and when we shot Amish Paradise. They were moving fast and they were shooting like 3 musical numbers a day. Like they did not have time to dedicate a lot of time to these scenes, but Rocky Road was one of the first musical numbers that they shot, and I got it assembled like the next day because Eric wanted to see how it was all playing. And in after watching it, he's like, "I like it, but like we're not close on Dan's face enough. Like we're not living in this moment, and I really wish I'd gotten close-ups, but like they couldn't go back to locations, they couldn't really dedicate time to it." So maybe Dan can speak to this because maybe you were on set for it, but towards the end of the shoot, when they were shooting in Al's house, like doing all of the childhood bedroom things, they put up like a curtain that matched the same color as the Rocky Road performance and the Amish Paradise, and they just shot really close on Dan's face and got the close-ups that we needed to like sell those moments, and which was like just a great ingenious way with the time and money that they had to get what we needed for those scenes.
Wait, so that worked?
It worked.
I didn't even know.
Great. Yeah,
I remember I heard Jamie and Eric told us afterwards, and I was like, "What? Wait, really?" Yeah, it looked amazing.
Yeah, we never knew.
Yeah,
nice. The viewers get to see the factory, the mysterious factory at the end. And Dan, how I guess fun was it to design a factory that has no description at all? Like you could kind of go wild with all these little machines and cranks and everything.
Yeah, it was awesome. We were very lucky in that we found amazing locations. I don't know if everybody knows, but we kind of took over this defunct part of Pomona College and just basically made it our studio. They had a hospital there, they had a park that we used as a cemetery, but they also had this weird room that I was like, this could be a factory. And they were like, this could absolutely be a factory. It was kind of good that it wasn't spelled out so much, so we could actually kind of make it whatever we wanted. So
Did you have to build that machine that Daniel uses with the lever and the
tiny crank?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That was a lot of different parts from a lot of different things is what that became. We're like, and then it should have a light on the top. Like, of course it should have a light.
I love that sometimes it's called factory in the movie.
Yeah,
they drop
Factory.
the. I love it. I love it.
Yeah. When you work at factory,
For Zach and Leo, I'm curious because usually a film has one composer. What is your working dynamic as co-composers? Does one of you specialize in a certain area and someone else in the other areas?
No, not really. We've just been working together for years and years and years. We met working in the same studio when we were much younger and realized we had an awesome vibe. So when we both left the nest, we found some gigs to start working together on, and then just realized that it's an awesome collaboration. And so we love to just bounce ideas off each other and trade music around. And yeah, that's what we do.
We're really good at, we just are always on the same page. Just musically, like our ideas are kind of just like we always go to the same thing. I think we have a lot of like the same references that we think we love a lot of the same music and film and TV, and we're always showing each other different types of things too. And it's very easy for us to like get each other jacked up. And this movie, I think we went in, you know, the second we watched the cut, we knew about this kind of like Forrest Gump vibe immediately. And both of us, we know like how to do that musically. And I think it was a great project for us to work together on.
And you mentioned the accordion player. How many total musicians were there for this project?
Well, a lot, because we recorded a full orchestra. So I guess probably about 80. But there's the orchestra. It's funny, the orchestra's got like 80 people in it, but you always just lump it into orchestra, like factory. So there's orchestra, and then there's accordion, and Zach, what else is like kind of like a one-off solo?
Well, no,
piano. There's piano throughout.
Yeah.
Including one like really virtuosic piano piece when Madonna goes over to Al's house for the first time.
My favorite piece of music in the whole movie. I love that. Yeah.
Amazing.
Awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, that we have an awesome video of our pianist recording that, and it's pretty sick.
Leo, we didn't have too many like individual players. We're so used to like a lot of the stuff we work on is like so maximalist, and we're like always going to like all these different musicians' houses and
taiko drums and like
guitars and everything like that. And this one
never heard of. Yeah,
it's just like we just had orchestra and accordion and pianos, and I think that's what I love the most about this project. Is it actually felt like one of the most traditional film scores I think we've ever worked on.
Very much. Well,
let's talk about awards. Gold Derby, we're a big, we're all awards nerds here. Weird won the Producers Guild Award for Best Movie. Daniel Radcliffe won the Critics' Choice Award. And I'm sure there's going to be Emmy nominations galore. Mike, when you signed on to this project, did you think that this parody about Weird Al's life would be an awards contender?
I think it's so funny because I just saw a screening where Eric, the director, Weird Al, spoke afterwards, and they were talking about how they wanted to do a parody movie of all these kind of awards-based movies coming out, like the biopics and things like that. And we were at an awards screening, and they were like, we made a parody of this, and now we're here actually getting these awards. and it's hilarious. I mean, I'm with them. I didn't really think so, but I will say that the first time I heard Zach and Leo's score, I may have felt a ping of that because of just how glorious and lush it sounded. I was just like, whoa, this is, and the first like scene, it just like, Weird Al's bursting through hospital doors, and it's so big and epic and insane. And I was just like, holy crap, this is like a real deal. This isn't like the parody thing that I was feeling at the beginning. So,
yeah. Mike and I were fortunate enough, we got nominated for an MPSC award for our work on the movie. And I was like, oh, if I go up there, I'm just going to give Weird Al speech from the movie if I win.
Yeah.
I love
that GIF.
See, Dad, I told you.
that GIF of him like just peeing his pants.
Yeah.
Just perfect.
I was going to do it. I was just going to go on stage and just let it, pee myself. Yeah.
That's great.
And Daniel Radcliffe, he's mostly known for playing a child wizard. He may not have been people's number one idea for who would play Weird Al, but he's so good in this. Does anyone want to talk about, what he was like on set and how impressed you were by his performance?
I mean, he's the real deal. I wasn't on set. I only met him ever so briefly at TIFF, but he was so nice in that brief moment. I think overall, everyone who worked on this film approached it with the utmost sincerity. And just we were all working on it to bring, like, despite it being a parody of and a comedy and all of these ridiculous things, and we kill Pablo Escobar, like we still all are approaching it like we were cutting or working on an award-winning film. Never, intending to win awards, but that's the kind of performance that Dan is giving as well. He may not be. I feel like sometimes he felt like he wasn't doing an exact imitation of Al, and he was feeling that, but from what I heard from Eric, but also we're like, Dan, you don't understand. You are this movie. You are the Al of this movie. You're not the Weird Al who wrote this movie. You are the character Al.
Yeah, I remember seeing he was cast, and I was like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like, I just like all the work he's been doing post Potter is so cool, and just been doing really rad work. So it's like, yeah, this definitely makes sense. I was lucky I got to help record ADR with him. Like, he came in to do ADR. We had a bunch of like stuff we needed to have him record for the movie. And there's the fight scene in the diner. I've talked about this before. He killed it. It was the fun. I'm sitting there. I'm like, sometimes it can be harder for actors to get into like a fight scene when you're in a recording booth. It's not a natural environment. He gets in the booth and just does all these fight effort sounds immediately and gets it in like one take. And I was like, man, this guy's so good. I'm like, oh yeah, he's a pro. He's been doing he's been doing this since he was a kid.
He added die, right?
And then that was the other thing. So then I was like, oh well, let's get one more take for safety. And he does this other take, and he does this run, and he adds the line when he's got the guy's head in a panini press. Daniel just yells, die! And I remember Eric and I in the room, in the studio, were just cracking up laughing. We're like, that's going in the movie, and it is. It makes me laugh every time. Yeah.
Wait, what's the wizard thing he was in?
Yeah.
Something with Dementors.
Yeah. The Dementor joke that that Mike and I caught that nobody else seemed to know about.
Never knew.
There's a scene where Dr. Demento goes, oh, I'll be your D-mentor. And Mike and I were always convinced, we're like, oh, it's like a Weird Al, or it's a Harry Potter joke. Like, they're like just poking a little bit of like fun at Harry Potter. And Eric and Jamie on the big stage were like, what? We didn't mean that at all. They're like, what? Yeah.
I always thought that was a joke we weren't supposed to acknowledge, but that we all knew.
Yeah, that's what it plays like that. In this movie, you think you're like, oh, they're kind of poking at it, and he's like, ha ha ha, and then it's done. But,
Dan, what could you tell us about Pablo Escobar's hideout set? It looked like it was filmed in this huge warehouse or something. What can you tell us about that?
It was a weird, big ass warehouse. It was all real cocaine, which is where most of my budget kind of went to that. Weirdly, that was one of the most expensive things we had to do, was make these giant bricks of cocaine, because we rented all the ones that were available, and then we had to make so many more. So we hired these two people, and that was their whole job, was just to wrap fake cocaine.
These two
we hired these people down in Colombia, and
they worked really long hours and seemed really into it. But yeah, we shot that also at that Pomona place. We found this empty warehouse and just brought in a bunch of dressing and dressed it for his birthday party, because that's the kind of party he would have.
Pablo Escobar's birthday,
yeah. I don't know if they'd have mariachis in Colombia. That was a bit of a stretch, but it was fun.
I'd love to talk about all of the celebrity cameos. Does anyone have a favorite? I really loved Lin-Manuel Miranda as the doctor, because that's the first scene of the movie, and Weird Al's coming in, he looks like he's injured, you're not sure what's going on, and then the doctor removes his mask and is Lin-Manuel Miranda, and I'm like, wait, what's going on?
I texted Eric when they finally announced it. I think I texted him and was like, so who is Lin playing in this? And he's like, you have no wait. Lin texted Al this morning and said, who am I playing? Because they're such good friends, and like he did the Hamilton polka for Lin. So I knew that was inevitable, and as a huge musical theater nerd, that was also my favorite cameo.
My favorite was Wolfman Jack, played by Jack Black, only because I think we were working on, it's like such a little moment, but one of my favorite musical score parts is after they play Another One Rides the Bus, and there's a slow zoom in on Wolfman Jack, and there's a high note that just plays and sustains, and he goes, that was the most beautiful thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And then the music swells, and it cracks me up every time, and it's so warm. I just love it. It's an amazing performance. It's just Jack Black doing like classic
Jack Black. Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think I was excited when I saw it was Conan O'Brien as playing Andy Warhol. That was pretty great. And then he has the flexitone, and he does that, and I just remember being like, oh, that's funny. And then I remember we had to replace that sound, and we had Eric actually. So it's actually Eric. The sound is actually Eric playing the flexitone, not Conan O'Brien playing the flexitone.
that flexitone.
Eric Panic called us the day before that and was like, guys, where can I get a flexitone? And we're like going through in our entire phone books trying to find a flexitone.
That was the big drama.
You know what ended up happening is he just went on Amazon. So we're on the mix stage and he's like, oh, I found one on Amazon. It's on Prime. I'll get it tomorrow. And it was just a cheapy one.
Pretty sure I sent that link.
Okay, great, yeah.
Eric also played chopsticks on the accordion in the in the polka party scene, and didn't he play a couple other instruments randomly throughout?
Probably. There was a lot of people just throwing stuff out there and recording it. Yeah.
Who played the fish?
Isn't that? I think that's
Eric.
That's Eric. Isn't that
Eric.
him just going
with his mouth?
Yeah, with his mouth. We left that sound in. We were like, this sounds perfect. We're not going to find anything better.
I loved Quinta Brunson as Oprah too.
Oh yeah,
that's great. We could talk about just the cameos for the next.
They're all great. Will Forte I love Will Forte and him getting that cigarette burn. It's like the funniest. It's a funny sound, and then it's him making a funny sound. And yeah, he's great. Everybody's great in this movie.
Oh, well, before we wrap up here, I'm curious if you could each name your favorite Weird Al song. Mine is Rocky Road. Mike, how about you?
So I'm going to go back to the beginning and say Fat, because it was just on constant, the video was on constant rotation in our house. And I'd love to go home and re-find that VHS tape.
Dan?
Too many. There's too many.
Yeah, there's a lot.
What's funny is I'm going to get the name wrong, but Saga Begins.
Yeah.
Yeah. Only because I did that video and it was like so fun to like.
You did that video?
What?
Yeah.
It's a legendary video.
I watch that video all the time. Yeah.
Oh, guys, I'm really flipping old.
I remember like the day that video came out and watching it.
Yeah.
I think it was on like TRL. I remember trying to vote for it on like
I
TRL.
know.
Yeah,
oh my god.
Oh my God.
I'm starstruck.
It was also on the Disney Channel.
So yeah, that'd be my favorite, I think.
Wow.
Anthony, what's your favorite?
I mean, it is hard to say. I could listen to any album and you go, oh, I love this song, I love this song, I love this song. I do have a soft spot. I love Amish Paradise. That's just like one of the, like that video made me laugh so hard. I know I said that earlier, but like, I just have that memory engraved for me. Anytime I hear that song, just like takes me back to just like watching that video and cackling. Yeah.
Leo?
I love Windows 95 Sucks. Because like I was a kid who was from like a household that had Apple computers as opposed to like anyone else who didn't have Apple computers. And like my friend, and that was because my friend's dad was like an Apple, like OG Apple fanboy. And so like, when my friend and I discovered that song, we thought it was like the funniest thing ever because like fuck Windows, ha ha ha.
And how about you, Zach?
Sorry, my dog is barking, so if you hear a bark, that's him.
I have a cat that keeps meowing next to me.
Okay, I actually cannot hear the cat. I learned what all the signs were from That's Your Horoscope for Today.
Yeah.
Off of Running with Scissors. So I love that one. Love it.
And Jamie, close us out.
Biggest Ball of Twine in Minnesota. I love a story song. I love a Harry Chapin-esque homage. It's my favorite.
Well, thank you everyone for chatting with us today. This has been so fun. I've mostly just been sitting here listening to all of these great stories. And, you know, Emmy voting is coming up. We encourage all of the Emmy voters out there. Don't forget Weird, the Al Yankovic Story on Roku. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so much for having us.
Everybody.